Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call this emergency meeting to order. It is 12 p.m. Tuesday, August the 8th, 2023, City Hall, Granbury City Hall, 116 West Bridge Street, Granbury, Texas, 76048. We're going to move right into the agenda, if you will. We have public comments on the agenda. Do we have anyone who's signed up? No one has signed up. So we're going to move immediately to the deliberation agenda, where we will have discussion of the cyber incident and consider approving ordinance number 23-55 budget amendment to fund consulting services to mitigate impact utilizing general fund balance ordinance number 23 that's one of the ads. Mr. Kaufman, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate y'all coming to this special meeting. I'm going to ask our Director of IT Services, Chris Collins, to give you a briefing on what's transpired and what the roadmap looks forward.
Okay, so on July 30th at approximately 3:30 in the morning, our managed service provider noticed some anomalies on the network, started to investigate them. I was notified shortly thereafter by one of our patrol officers that something was suspicious on his computer. I came into the office and immediately identified it as being something of malicious nature and disconnected those systems that the user had logged in to basically start remediating the situation. From then on, myself and my staff and Buchanan started to look at how this system, how this malicious activity was traversing the network, and in about 8 hours, around 1 o'clock on the same day, we were able to contain what we could tell was basically happening. Monday and Tuesday of the same week, systems that weren't powered on were powered on, and it caused the same type of activity to occur, but we were able to contain it. And as of Wednesday of last week, there was no new signs of infection on the network. So Buchanan started to do the restore process while looking at our backups to ensure the backups that we were using weren't infected, and then they started to deploy those. They successfully migrated approximately 7 servers, which were prioritized by my department. And on Sunday at about 2 this morning, new activity started to occur. And what was concerning about this activity is it is using native communications that run normal processes in the Windows environment. So this would not be detected by your traditional security measures. And so they notified me, and we started to look at it. And so what I instructed them to do from that point was to power down the servers that we had restored to prevent further infection. During the course of last week, I did contact CGIS for notification of the security incident. I contacted another agency for assistance. I also did contact Texas DIR and talk to their CSO about some of the things that we were seeing and the steps that we were taking, and based upon what we were doing at that time and what our managed service provider was doing at that time seemed appropriate. Based off of all that information, we were pretty confident with going with remediation that route, but due to Sunday's incident at 2 o'clock this morning and this tool that's being used appearing to be able to adapt and obfuscate itself from detection, we made the decision to contact our insurance, who I had previously had conversations with, to look at getting a third-party incident response organization to come augment our staff and Buchanan to continue this cleanup. Last week I did have a call with some other vendors that were required for IRP. IRP basically has attorneys and incident response organizations that are part of their policy that you have to use at different cost. One of the companies that I spoke with was going to utilize our tool set and use an open source tool set, and was going to do it for a very low cost, and we're pretty confident that they could get it done. But based upon my experience and the sophistication that I was seeing in these movements prior to Sunday's incident, I believed using our tool set, if that was in fact good enough, why would we pay someone else to use our tools to get it remediated? Due to Sunday's incident, obviously our tool needs to be augmented, and that's why I initiated the IRP to engage a third-party vendor, which is part of why this meeting is being engaged, to get the funding that we need to move forward. Based off of that conversation with Chris yesterday, we executed the contract with that third party, and they began remediation beginning yesterday afternoon. That's kind of what I have right now. I'll entertain any questions that you may have going forward.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Chris, was it because of the lack of securities or lack of the equipment being outdated and the security patches and upgrades to our systems is a vulnerability in our network?
Correct. So prior to me taking this position last July, I did request that the city provide a full vulnerability scan of our network. And it identified vulnerabilities within our network, and majority of those vulnerabilities were attributed to lack of patching, lack of updating of equipment, and so since I've taken this position and brought Buchanan on, one of the biggest gaps was lack of patching of systems and endpoint management. We were able to do the initial containment because of some of the tools that were in play. However, a lot of the inherent legacy system configurations can't automatically be changed without user impact. So we were slowly working through the network and working through systems that we could to update. So an example is we started to procure switches for the network because our previous provider told the city that they were segmenting our network, and that actually never happened. They replaced switches that were end of life in like 2008 with layer 2 switches which don't have security built into them. So the switches that I purchased, which I hadn't been able to deploy yet, have layer 3 capability where you could set up segmentation, and I actually signed a contract before this incident to start that implementation with Buchanan, but with everything going on, starting one step at a time, that's how my department has been trying to keep city services going while implementing the security. It's a lot harder to implement security after the fact versus as part of the build without interrupting operations. So to answer your question, yes, there are active vulnerabilities that we were aware of, that we were mitigating, but there were so many that it couldn't be done without taking the entire network down and basically doing a full redesign, which obviously we couldn't do that because that would have interrupted city operations.
I think it'd be prudent for the city just to do that vulnerability study and also just identify those switches, routers, or network equipment that has those vulnerabilities and really concentrate on that, because if we're not able to patch or make those patches to those devices, we can face this again.
So to clarify that situation, so the systems that we have that we're able to patch, they are patched. The initial vector of infection was a 0-day infection, so it didn't matter if the system was patched, it's never been seen before. That's how it was able to get onto the network.
All right, thank you.
And just to add to that comment, as part of our contract with our current provider, we have endpoint management, which I get a report on endpoints, and then vulnerability assessments are done against our network, and I get reports for that. The vulnerabilities that are against our network that we've come so far have been remediated to the point that they can be remediated with the equipment that we have.
I appreciate it. The one thing I would give the city accolades on is that they've implemented a hybrid situation where we have a director of IT looking at the service level agreements of our contractors and making sure that they are held to those standards. And, unfortunately, before you came on, they could tell us anything and we would take it at their word that they were doing it. Like you had said, that segregation of those, the different land segregations were there, but never implemented. So I give the city management and their staff kudos on making those changes, bringing you on board. That way you can see what's going on and making those changes to better secure our network. Thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Wadley? No? Mr. Corrigan?
Just one, and I just sent this to Chris, a fellow IT, not being myself, but for you guys, a friend of mine that is in cybersecurity sent me a link to DHS. They have grants of $375 million for state and local government cyber resilience efforts. I don't know if that's something that we've looked into, or it may not have anything to do with what we're currently dealing with, but to purchase and fix some of the pieces of equipment and things that you've discussed that we haven't quite gotten around to yet because it falls in a process. I didn't know if that's something you guys had looked at.
So I am aware of those fundings. Those fundings are usually typically assigned to SCADA type systems, so we do have those types of systems here.
Okay.
Any funding that we can get additionally, yes, we will look into doing those grants, but I was basically working off of the budget that I had this
Sure.
year to remediate and look for savings where I could do remediation with savings that I found elsewhere.
Excellent. More point of conversation then. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wadley? Thank you. Mr. Corrigan?
In our packet, it says that the hacker has continued to work against us and has caused more harm. Someone's actively doing something like right now, like trying to, I don't understand the objective, like our system's compromised. I sort of know what that means just from the words. I'm not a computer guy.
So the
But-
simple sense of compromise is a actor will inject a tool into the environment to enhance his ability to move across the network. So the initial infection, the person clicked on something that basically activated the malicious software, and that malicious software used that user's credentials to traverse the network. So anywhere that user logged into previously, yes, sir. Anywhere that user previously logged into, it automatically infected those machines because he had the credentials. And then from that perspective, because that user was logged into our NetMotion system, it allowed that to traverse from the PD side to the city side. Because if you're not aware, the PD network has its own stack and was basically built to stand on its own to meet CJIS requirements because of the vulnerabilities that were found on the city side network. Once it got to the city side network, because our network is not segmented, it spread a lot quicker than it should have. So when going to active, so we didn't see any activity from Wednesday. It was pretty much contained. But then we started to see new activity, which right now they're trying to classify if this is the same person that got in or if this is a new actor coming in. And just from my experience, typically a bad guy that's amateur will, if he successfully gets into a site that is of value, he will advertise it on the black market and say, hey, I have this interesting thing that might have stuff that you might be interested in. I don't have any more tools. I can't get any further. Or they stopped me, and it becomes a challenge for someone else. And so that entity will come in and use the reconnaissance that the previous entity did to, again, take advantage of the network. From what we can see right now, most of the tools that are using are Windows specific. That's why a lot of our applications that don't have any Windows integration aren't being affected by this system.
So when you said a value, like what is that? What is a hacker's goal? It's messing with our system, but what do they want?
So the easiest way to do the analogy, and this is, me speaking from my prior life, if I know, I'm just going to use you, Eddie, if you don't mind. If I know Eddie has access to information, I know he's a harder target, I'm going to access someone close to him to gain access to him. So Mr. Kaufman has a lot of history, a lot of contacts, a lot of connections throughout his career. In the actor's mind, a smaller city is an easier target because they don't have the funding, but they didn't know what capabilities we had, and that's why we were initially able to contain it in 8 hours. They could be after something the city has. They could be after, our ERP system. We're not seeing any evidence of that right now. But typically in these situations for this type of malicious actor, it's either to hold your system as ransom for encrypting your information. This tool did not do any encryption that we can see right now, or that we can see thus far. Or it's to do an exfil, where they pull information that they believe is valuable to that organization, and they extort that organization later on. Based on the activity that we've seen from our firewalls outbound, we haven't seen anything but normal traffic going out of our firewalls. So with this particular malicious version, those are the two objectives. It's either to hold the network ransom where you can't do anything, and most people don't know this, but the best solution to remediating ransomware is to have a good backups. That's part of the reason why when I negotiated the contract, we had on-site backups and we had cloud backups. So as soon as this incident happened, I told them I don't trust anything on site, let's go straight to the cloud. And they started looking at the cloud backups to make sure they weren't affected, and that's what we were doing our restores from. So does that answer your question, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
And are you we got 3 different dollar amounts here. Are you talking about that, or is?
I can speak to those. So initially, before the activity occurred on Sunday, we were looking at a statement of work, which I had given to Jeremy to review initially, to have our third party, Buchanan, do the complete remediation. Because we appeared to have it contained, we didn't see any other activity happening, and we had what we call the IOCs, the indicators of compromise identified. So they started their network cleanup and started the restoration. Because of the trigger of the event on Sunday, in order to implement and use our insurance, we have to use a third party that is identified by Beasley, the insurance provider. And so they have attorneys that we have to use, and they have remediation companies that we have to use. So there's a $15,000 charge for the attorney, which is a fee, a flat fee that you pay if there is no customer information compromised. Right now, we don't have that, so that's the fee that we're paying. If later on in this investigation we discover that there is customer information at compromise, then that fee for the attorney goes up to $25,000. Right now, we are only operating on the breach response portion of our policy, which has no deductible and has a set amount available. The quote that you see for our third-party provider, originally that quote came under $300,000, and I talked to them about our environment. I spoke to them about what we have done. I spoke to them about the tools that we have, and because of the intelligence and the information we were able to provide them ahead of time, I was able to get about $100,000, a little more than $100,000 taken off that quote to save the city money moving forward. So the third figure is the coverage of our insurance that is covered. A portion of that will, the $15,000 portion of that will go to the lawyer and attorney that we had to put on retainer, and the remaining of that figure will go towards paying the third party in addition to the extra excess funds that we're going to need to pay out of our budget.
I might just add that what we did is we looked at the total budget. I rounded it up to 300,000, knowing that we're going to get reimbursed up to 75,000. There's some other tiers of coverage that might kick in should the damage be worse than what we see right now. But that's kind of the way we're looking at it. I also built in some contingency there in case something else happens, so I don't have to have another special meeting to spend another $50,000. So hopefully we won't have to, but at the same time, we're looking at ways to migrate our Encode at a faster pace to a cloud-based application. Working on that today. Aside from the mitigation of what Chris is doing, we're working with Encode to possibly be able, we were trying to mitigate or migrate to the cloud-based service that they offer so that we're not on our servers. And if we can get that done during this process, that's going to cost some money too. And so that gets us up and running quicker on our financial books. So we really need to get that done as quick as possible, regardless of what we end up doing here. Ultimately, we need to make that transition for Encode to be on their cloud. And just like OpenGov, our budget software, we're able to open it and utilize it using the Verizon Wi-Fi signal that we can do through our phones to our laptops. All those cloud-based services that we currently use, we can continue to use. And Encode, unfortunately, is housed on premises, and it's down. So we've been operating old school for a week, or since last Monday, a week ago, trying to accommodate customers paying their bills and taking care of customer service needs old school without a computer. So the quicker we can get Encode back up, the better off we are. We don't have that listed here. This concept came up today as we're moving forward, trying to mitigate everywhere we can to minimize impacts to the city organization. So we're very happy that we were able to contain it, and we haven't been held hostage. We haven't, some of the machines said a red bar. I didn't read what it says, but it was, it didn't hold us where we couldn't take care of our problems. So that's a good thing.
So one other comment I want to make related to the financial piece. So just so the council is aware, the way our contract is written with Buchanan, their job was to stop the bleed. The restoration piece is not part of our contract from a breach perspective, but they continue to come alongside us and work with us knowing that we needed to be up. And that figure that they gave us was the figure to bring us back to whole before the Sunday incident happened.
So we really don't know exactly what it's going to cost yet, but we're working. That's why we're having an emergency meeting. We're kind of under the gun, trying to provide services under the extreme circumstances.
Ms. Burwell.
Thank you, sir. Chris, I know that you're a police officer by trade, but I just want to tell you how much we appreciate you doing this at all hours of the night. That's extremely helpful. Obviously, I know it's part of your job, but it's still very much appreciated. 3:30 in the morning is nothing to laugh at. So I have a couple of questions, and I think mostly they're directed to you, Mr. Kaufman. A, where's the money going to come from? Obviously, it's a need, just specifically. And then maybe for you, Chris, this is just a general question. What are the odds of actually figuring out who did this and prosecuting that entity?
So without going into details, so I have engaged another law enforcement agency, but if this is not in the United States, I worked counterintelligence for 6 years. Putting a person behind the keyboard, unless they're known and identified by been identified previously, is pretty zil to none. But if it is someone that's in the United States, that they will get found, 100%.
To answer your question, we're taking the money from the general fund reserve balance.
Okay. Well, we're talking about money. If this is for 300,000, is this the fastest you can do it for 300,000? Could you get to where we need to be quicker with 400,000?
So the entity that I engaged, if you do your research, they are the top tier. This is what they live and breathe. They live cyber intelligence, which is basically looking at bad actors, what they do, identifying their indicators of compromise, identifying them in some cases. Talking about nation-state actors, I don't want to go too far, but they can say these are the organizations of the government that carry out these types of, if it is government run, they can tell you that that's the organization that targeted you.
So also, the vendor that we put together, there were cheaper
Then Texas
options.
DRR.
Like they said, hey, we can do it for 30,000, but we're going to use your tools and, well, that's not getting it. So we've gone through an analysis to come up with the very best option that we believe we could have at this time that also works with our insurance. So that's where we're at with the TMLRP consultant.
Right, well, I don't think any of us could be prouder of what you've accomplished. You kept us from, a disaster, really. But my question is, are we supporting you to the fullest extent that you need to get this done as quickly as we can?
Absolutely. The hurdles that I just have to deal with are hurdles of dealing with users and not understanding, and so I'm trying to communicate with my user base the best I can. Obviously, public safety is an issue, so I have to allow certain things that I wouldn't normally allow during this, but we understand that public safety has to continue. I've allowed some exceptions for our utility billing folks, and I've put as many measures in place that I could put in place. So just so you guys understand, all of our endpoints had a tool that was used to mitigate this. As part of this other vendor, they have deployed their own endpoint tool. So now there are two tools looking. The difference between the tool that we had deployed is it's an active tool. The tool that the new vendor is deploying is what's called a threat hunter. So it's not only looking at the computer, but it's looking at all the computers around it, and they've already identified some new things that we weren't aware of that was happening. So.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Goffin?
So last Friday, or it might have been Thursday, I had a visit with Mr. Collins about all this, and it appeared that we were on a path to complete restoration, probably by today even, and we were assuming the cost at that point was going to be able to be absorbed through his budget of unappropriated funds that he'd been cutting back where he was, where we were trying to migrate into that Encode, and we were planning on utilizing those funds in this cycle to fund this. And then when the Sunday event happened, we decided yesterday that we needed to reach in and appropriate some funds to address this problem. And that's why we've declared a disaster, to allow us to meet quickly and to appropriate the funds and to secure the necessary services that we need to address the issues. So what I'm trying to do is take us down a legal path that, when our auditors come behind us months from now, they'll say, hey, they did that right, and hey, it was an extreme situation and they needed to respond quickly and they did it appropriately. So that's kind of where we're at today. Thank y'all for coming, and certainly appreciate your consideration of this agenda item.
Okay. Council, any other questions? Mr.
Chris, are
Rodriguez?
we putting a PR statement out?
Yes, we've got it ready to go as soon as the meeting's over.
Ms. Berwick?
Again, nobody that has private information at the city has lost that data. It has not been breached to this point. And so we hope that we can maintain that security. If there is a breach of that internal security, then there's more insurance that kicks in, and there's more applications that we need to do, and there's services that we need to provide to those victims. So we're not in that situation yet, and we hope not to get there. Thank goodness to a great team and proactive measurements all along the way. I mean, just like the police officer notifying him in the middle of the night of something that came up on his screen speaks volumes to the training that's gone on within the organization and the alertness, just people being aware of the vulnerabilities out there. Simply opening an email that says you want a $50 gift card to Walmart can be the trick that sends us into a situation like this. So, but we have filters for that kind of stuff, but still, it can happen. So I've come to the fact the acceptance, it's not a matter of if you get hacked, it's a matter of when, if you're a municipality. I read an article this morning from a news article, news link called Governing Today. They said 44% of all hacks that occur in the United States are hitting local governments, local municipalities, counties, schools, and municipalities. So we are an easy target because we're small. The article goes on to talk about the state of Arizona working to create a state system to help small localities be prepared for cyber attacks and to defend against them better. So the world's evolving around this topic, and as more and more local governments are attacked, more and more resources are going to become available on a shared basis, or that's the goal. And if all the cities in Texas join together and said, okay, we're going to share information, and as soon as we get attacked by something, that information is be able to be shared with all the other local governments in the state, that can't do anything but help us all. And so that's the direction I think that we're all headed. And this is just a transition period of technology and trying to catch up with the security side of it.
In that PR statement, is it gonna,
Mr. Corbett.
are we telling everyone that their information thus far has not been compromised? Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
and a phone number in which they can pay their bill. And there's no late charges and there's no disconnects, and we need to start billing for the next round of bills, and we're not going to be able to do that till this system's back up. So we've got 3 billing cycles, and so one of the billing cycles completed week before last, and another one is supposed to be completed this week. So that obviously is not going to happen unless we're able to migrate to that cloud really quick and get somebody spun up that knows how to run it from the cloud-based version. So we got a lot of work to do.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve ordinance number 23-55, a budget amendment to fund consulting services to mitigate the impact of cyber incident utilizing the general fund balance?
So moved.
Ms. Burwell makes the motion.
Second.
Mr. Rodriguez makes the second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. I hear no nays. It passes 6-0.
Thank you all.
I hear, what?
Mr. Bell's not here, 5-0.
Oh, 5-0. 5-0. And again, Chris and all your crew and everybody else that's been working on this, so much appreciated, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. I believe that there is no other business, unless someone brings something up. There is no other business. I am going to adjourn the meeting.